Welcome, my friends. Come hear the tale of sinister occult rituals in the Red Hook area of Brooklyn, New York. We follow the investigations of Thomas Malone, a police detective who is investigating the mysterious and reclusive Robert Suydam and his dark and insidious activities. As he delves deeper, Malone uncovers a cult performing hideous rituals involving human sacrifice. Risking his life and sanity, Malone heads into the decrepit, decaying, old brick buildings of Red Hook to confront the cult, with horrific side effects that change his life forever. All in The Horror at Red Hook. Link to episode 1 above. In part 3, we investigate cult involvement in the child kidnappings and the death of Suydam at sea. To continue to make content, we need to grow. So please like, subscribe, but just as importantly, comment and share. The algorithm must be fed, or else it will consume the channel. And comments are one of its favourite meals. Only you can feed it. Come, sit, watch and listen, as it's time to enter the Cave of Chronicles. Then, two incidents occurred, wide enough apart, but both of intense interest in the case as Malone envisaged it. One was a quiet announcement in the Eagle of Robert Suydam's engagement to Miss Cornelia Gerritsen of Bayside, a young woman of excellent position and distantly related to the elderly bridegroom-elect. Whilst the other was a raid on the dance hall church by city police after a report that the face of a kidnapped child had been seen for a second at one of the basement windows. Malone had participated in this raid and studied the place with much care when inside. Nothing was found. In fact, the building was entirely deserted when visited. But the sensitive Celt was vaguely disturbed by many things about the interior. There were crudely painted panels he did not like, panels which depicted scarred faces with peculiarly worldly and sardonic expressions, and which occasionally took liberties that even the layman's sense of decorum could scarcely countenance. Then too, he did not relish the Greek inscription on the wall above the pulpit, an ancient incantation which he had once stumbled upon in Dublin college days, and which read, literally translated, "O friend and companion of night, thou who rejoiced in the baying of dogs and spit blood, who wanderest in the mid of shades, amongst the tombs, who longest for blood and brightest terror to mortals. Gorge Mormo, thousand-faced moon, look favourably upon our sacrifice." When he read this, he shuddered and thought vaguely of the cracked bass organ notes he fancied he had heard beneath the church on certain nights. He shuddered again at rust around the rim of a metal basin which stood on the altar, and paused nervously when his nostrils seemed to detect a curious and ghastly stench from somewhere in the neighbourhood. That organ memory haunted him, and he explored the basement with particular assiduity before he left. The place was very hateful to him, yet After all, were the blasphemous panels and inscriptions more than the credulties perpetrated by the ignorant? By the time of Suydam's wedding, the kidnapping epidemic had become a popular newspaper scandal. Most of the victims were young children of the lowest classes, but the increasing number of disappearances had worked up a sentiment of the strongest fury. Journals clamoured for action from the police, and once more the Butler Street station sent its men over Red Hook for clues, discoveries and criminals. Malone was glad to be on the trail again and took pride in a raid on one of Suydam's Parker Place houses. There indeed no stolen child was found, despite the tales of screams and the red sash picked up in the areaway. But the paintings and rough inscriptions on the peeling walls of most of the rooms and the primitive chemical laboratory in the attic all helped to convince the detective that he was on the track of something tremendous. The paintings were appalling, hideous monsters of every shape and size, and parodies on human outlines which cannot be described. The writing was in red and varied from Arabic to Greek, Roman and Hebrew letters. Malone could not read much of it, but what he did decipher was pretentious and Kabbalistic enough. One frequently repeated motto was a sort of Hebraized Hellenistic Greek and suggested the most terrible demon evocations of the Alexandrian decadence. Hell, Elohim, Sotha, Amanavel, Sabaoth, Agla, Tetramanation, Agiros, Othos, Ichiros, Athanatos, Jehovah, Baal, Adonal, Sadie, Homovision, Methas, Esarandii. Circles and pentagrams loomed on every hand and told indubitably of the strange beliefs and aspirations of those who dwelt so squalidly here. In the cellar, however, the strangest thing was found: a pile of genuine gold ingots covered carelessly with a piece of burlap, and bearing upon their shining surfaces the same weird hieroglyphics which also adorned the walls. During this raid, the police encountered only passive resistance from the East Asian occupants that swarmed from every door. Finding nothing relevant, they had to leave all as it was. But the precinct captain wrote Suydam a note advising him to look closely at the character of his tenants and proteges in view of the growing public clamour. Then came the June wedding and the great sensation. Flatbush was gay for the hour about high noon, and pennanted motors thronged the streets near the old Dutch church, where an awning stretched from door to highway. No local event ever surpassed the Suydam Gerritsen nuptials in tone and scale, and the party which escorted the bride and groom to the Cunard Pier was, if not exactly the smartest, at least a solid page from the social register. At 5 o'clock, a dew was waved, and the ponderous liner edged away from the long pier, slowly turned its nose seaward, discarded its tug, and headed for widening water spaces that led to old world wonders. By night, the outer harbour was cleared, and late passengers watched the stars twinkling above the unpolluted ocean. Whether the tramp steamer or the screen was first to gain attention, no one can say. Probably they were simultaneous, but it is of no use to calculate. The scream came from the Suydam stateroom, and the sailor who broke down the door could perhaps have told frightful things if he had not forthwith gone completely mad. As it was, he shrieked more loudly than the first victims, and thereafter ran simpering around the vessel till caught and put in irons. The ship's doctor, who entered the stateroom and turned on the lights a moment later, did not go mad, but told nobody what he saw till afterward, when he corresponded with Malone in Chipachet. It was murder, strangulation, but one need not say that the claw marks on Mrs. Suydam's throat could not have come from her husband or any other human hand, or that upon the white wall there flickered for an instant in hateful red a legend which, later copied from memory, seems to have been nothing less than the fearsome Chaldee letters of the word Lilith. One need not mention these things because they vanished so quickly. As for Suydam, one could at least bar others from the room until one knew what to think oneself. The doctor has distinctly assured Malone that he did not see it. The open portal just before he turned on the lights was clouded for a second in a certain phosphorescence, and for a moment there seemed to echo in the night outside the suggestion of a faint and hellish tittering, but no real outline met the eye. As proof, the doctor points to his continued sanity. Then the tramp steamer claimed all attention. A boat put off, and a horde of swart, insolent ruffians in officer's dress swarmed about the temporarily halted Canada. They wanted Suydam or his body. They had known of his trip, and for certain reasons were sure he would die. The captain's deck was almost a pandemonium, for at the instant between the doctor's report from the stateroom and the demands of the men from the tramp, not even the wisest and gravest seaman could think what to do. Suddenly, the leader of the visiting mariners, an Arab with a hatefully wide mouth, pulled forth a dirty, crumpled paper and handed it to the captain. It was signed by Robert Suydam and bore the following odd message: in case of sudden or unexpected accident or death on my part, please deliver me or my body unquestioningly into the hands of the bearer and his associates. Everything for me and perhaps you depend on absolute compliance. Explanations can come later. Do not fail me now. Robert Suydam. Captain and doctor looked at each other, and the latter whispered something to the former. Finally, they nodded rather helplessly and led the way to the Suydam stateroom. The doctor directed the captain's glance away as he unlocked the door and admitted the strange seaman. Nor did he breathe easily till they filed about with their burden after an uncountably long period of preparation. It was wrapped in the bedding from the berths, and the doctor was glad that the outlines were not very revealing. Somehow the men got the thing over the side and away to their tramp steamer without uncovering it. The Canada started again, and the doctor and ship's undertaker sought out the Suydam stateroom to perform what last services they could. Once more, the physician was forced to reticence and even to mendacity, for a hellish thing had happened. When the undertaker asked him why he had drained all of Mrs. Suydam's blood, he neglected to affirm that he had not done so. Nor did he point to the vacant bottle spaces on the rack, or the odour in the sink which showed the hasty disposition of the bottle's original contents. The pockets of those men, if men they were, had bulged damnably when they left the ship. 2 hours later, and the world knew by radio all that it ought to know about the horrible affair. That same June evening, without having heard a word from the sea, Malone was very busy among the alleys of Red Hook. A sudden stir seems to permeate the place, as if appraised by grapevine telegraph of something singular. The denizens clustered expectantly around the dance hall church and the houses in Parker Place. 3 children had just disappeared, blue-eyed Norwegians from the streets towards Gowanus, and there were rumours of a mob forming among the sturdy Viking of that section. Malone had for weeks been urging his colleagues to attempt a general clean-up, and at last, moved by conditions more obvious to their common sense than the conjectures of a Dublin dreamer, they had agreed upon a final stroke. The unrest and menace of this evening had been the deciding factor, and just about midnight a raiding party recruited from 3 stations descended upon Parker Place and its environs. Doors were battered in, stragglers arrested, and candle-lighted rooms forced to disgorge unbelievable throngs of mixed foreigners in figured robes, mitres, and other inexplicable devices. Much was lost in the melee, for objects were thrown hastily down unexpected shafts, and betraying odours deadened by the sudden kindling of pungent incense. But spattered blood was everywhere, and Malone shuddered whenever he saw a brazier or altar from which the smoke was still rising. He wanted to be in several places at once, and decided on Suydam's basement flat only after a messenger had reported the complete emptiness of the dilapidated dance hall church. The flat, he thought, must hold some clue to a cult which the occult scholar had obviously become the centre and leader. And it was with real expectancy that he ransacked the musty rooms, noted their vaguely charnel odour, and examined the curious books, instruments, gold ingots, and glass stoppered bottles scattered carelessly here and there. Once a lean black and white cat edged between his feet and tripped him, overturning at the same time a beaker half full of red liquid. The shock was severe, and to this day Malone is not certain of what he saw. But in dreams he still pictures that cat as it scuttled away with certain monstrous alterations and peculiarities. Then came the locked cellar door, and the search for something to break it down. A heavy stool stood near, and its tough seat was more than enough for the antique panels. A crack formed and enlarged, and the whole door gave way. But from the other side, whence poured a howling tumult of ice-cold wind, with all the stenches of the bottomless pit, and whence reached a sucking force not of earth or heaven, which, coiling sentiently about the paralysed detective, dragged him through the aperture and down the unmeasured spaces, filled with whispers and wails in gusts of mocking laughter. So ends part 3 of The Horror at Red Hook. In the final episode, find out what happens to Detective Malone and what terrors are unleashed to rip his sanity asunder. We currently release at least 3 episodes a week, more in the weeks when we release a complete version, so check the channel page for more stories. Link above. If you enjoyed the tale, it helps us if you let others know, so please click the like button. Subscribing will let you travel with us on future adventures, with the bell notifying you as we set off. And if you want to join our band of intrepid explorers of the unknown, come visit us on Patreon. There we have a Discord server where you can share in the discussion about stories told with both myself and the other members, and even join the book club. There will be behind the scenes content, early access content, and options to guide which stories are chosen as the membership grows. There are even tiers to get your own stories produced, and a free tier if you just want notifications and updates. YouTube memberships will follow when I have enough subscribers. If you subscribe, it will help, but please, only if you can afford it. Let me know in the comments if there are any specific stories you would like to see portrayed in this format. I'm even open to suggestions on how I can improve the content. I try and reply to every comment, so your input will not be ignored. See the description for details of the Patreon, our other social media pages, and for a link to Canje Studios to find out about Arkham horror board games. Click on the end screen to subscribe, go to the next story in the series, or hear about Derek the Dice. Until next time, farewell. But remember, we live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far.